Hey Benji.
Hey, Michael, how's things?
Hey, hey.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Brad's not here. Right. Just Benoit's. Okay. Are we? I'm not sure if we can hear you guys, but
Yeah, I can hear
Happy
you.
New Year.
also sorry for the bad name. I have not figured out how to change our VC names on Zoom, so me and Jeanette are pastrami on rye today. I assume that's the name that we're
Yeah,
showing.
that's
Yeah.
what we see.
Okay.
up, friends? Hello. Just lost my link to my agenda. Hmm. All right. I would say we have a medium-sized agenda for the day, which seems about right after winter holidays. I hope everybody got some rest, got some family time, got to do a little adventuring, perhaps. Anyone do anything particularly cool over the holidays?
We had a New Year's Eve party for all our toddler friends, well, our friends who have toddlers. Then we did like British midnight, so like 6 p.m. here when it's midnight in London. Countdown, ball drop, London fireworks. It's pretty fun.
That's great. That's a great idea. We uh didn't do anything British, but we did certainly celebrate the the New Year's Eve moment on GMT time because otherwise the children can't last into the evening. Benji, you get to go go-karting. That sounds fun.
Yeah, the kids really like that. It was good fun. Very fast around an indoor track, 2 levels. Um, some minor collisions.
Crash is good at half of it go-karting. 2 levels. That sounds awesome. Um, all right, our participant list has stabilized. Let's kick things off. All right, everybody, welcome, welcome. Of course, as we are all here, we agree to the spec membership agreement, participation guidelines, contribution guide, code of conduct, etc., etc. There's links to all those at the top of the agenda as per usual. And also a reminder that we're going to record these and publish them to YouTube. And there's going to be some summary that happens there. As we usually do, let's do a quick names to faces intro of attendees. We'll go in the order that's in the agenda file, which just in case I will drop a link in the chat here. If you happen to not be on that list yet, no worries, just send a quick PR. We'll get you added. And since my name is at the top, I'll start. Hello, everybody. My name is Lee.
Yes, hello. I believe I'm the next one. My name is Bjørn from Trifork in Denmark.
Hey, hello everyone. My name is Martin. I'm here with Apollo from Paris, France.
Hey, folks. I'm Benji from GraphQL in the UK.
Hey, I'm Mark from Yelp in Austin.
I am Jeanette from Meta in New York.
Hello, Benoit from Apollo.
Hi, I'm Matt, also Meta in New York.
Hi, Rob from First Dibs.
Hi, I'm Michael from Chili Cream.
I'm Pascal from Chili Cream too, and I will soon have a face, but not yet.
Hi, I'm one from Kinetics, and I'm from Lviv, Ukraine.
Hey everybody, Jeff Oriema here from based in Connecticut. I'm with Apollo.
Awesome. I think we hit everybody. Nobody's missed out. Beautiful. Thank you all for doing that. Let's do a quick scan over our agenda just to make sure we haven't missed anything. We got a couple TSC announcements to get through. We've got some type composition discussion, fragments for reuse, scalar versioning, directives on directives. GraphQL Golden Path Initiative, service capabilities, and defer and stream updates. I suspect that'll keep us busy for the next hour and change, but anything not listed here that anyone wants to make sure we have on our agenda? Cool. I think we've got our agenda. I actually have one thing to add, which I'll just make sure we do at the top. I'll make it part of our TSC headline since that's my space to yammer on anyhow. Which is GraphQL Conf is going to be coming early this year. We're going to do it in the spring, aiming for early May, I think first week of May. Um, a huge thanks to Meta, who is going to be the primary sponsor. And the thing that they're doing for the primary sponsorship is they're giving us venue space. So we're actually going to host it in one of the large auditoriums at the Meta office, which should be pretty cool. But anyhow, there's a couple of things worth framing up front. One is to please be aware that there are our CFP process. I think actually the CFP is already officially open. We just haven't like sent links anywhere yet. But if there's stuff that you'd like to talk about and share at GraphQL Conf this year, start thinking about that. We'll start making some noise about CFP very, very imminently. And if you have folks on your team who you think are working on really cool stuff that they should go speak at the conference, please make sure that they're aware as well. So we're going to probably move relatively quickly through CFP process this year since usually we plan starting now for a fall event and we're doing a spring event. So we've got kind of a truncated timeline. So that's sort of like piece number one is start thinking about CFP. Piece two is we're looking for some volunteers to help organize the event. In particular, one thing that would be extremely helpful is if we had someone who wanted to be like a website DRI and help us coordinate to make sure that the website content comes together. I don't expect this to be like a massive thing. We're not rebuilding the website from scratch. We're going to take a lot of the great website work that the guild has done in previous years and recycle as much of that as possible. So it's primarily just going to be content management, but having sort of like one person who wants to raise their hand to volunteer to do that would be awesome. Yeah, thank you for both for the DRI means directly responsible individual and Jess pointed out that the vast majority of the work is markdown content with light touches on CSS and JavaScript along the way. So if anyone here is interested in helping out with the website or any other aspect of the event, just send me a message. Or if you think somebody on your team would have a lot of fun doing that, I think this is like a really cool way to get involved with open source for anyone on your teams who hasn't sort of broken into open source yet, but has expressed interest because it's like not a huge technical undertaking. This kind of task in particular is sort of like modest on a time commitment, and it is very high in terms of like social fabric overlap. So someone who wants to get into open source and like build a bunch of social connectivity with us lot and the rest of the TSC and folks who organize conferences and things like that could be very, very cool for like a earlier career person. Um, so anyhow, that's the other thing worth flagging and thinking about. So think about your CFPs, and if you want to help, and in particular, if you want to help on the website, let me know. So that's my one agenda to squeeze in. The other one to squeeze in is just a little bit of an awareness for this crew, which is we've had the TSC nomination process now open for a couple of weeks, and we are going to kick off the elections for that. So there's links in the agenda for that elections process. I believe in the prior agenda item, we had links to the actual nomination doc. If for whatever reason you haven't nominated yourself and you're like, oh shit, this is finally happening, I totally meant to do that. Do it today because tomorrow is when I'm going to do the official slice of who are the nominees are and kick off our elections. And those elections tend to happen pretty quickly over the course of a day or two. And then we'll have some new TSC members, hopefully, to join our ranks. So those are the updates for me on TSC and events. Benji, I'm going to hand it to you for the next TSC topic around community specs.
Thanks. Just looking for the unmute button. Yes, there are a number of so the GraphQL spec is fantastic, but it's generally quite unopinionated. It acts as a solid base that we can build things on top of. There are a number of specs that we have out there in the ecosystem. We've got obviously the old relay style specs that are now GraphQL specs, the connection spec, the mutation input object spec, the global object identification spec. But there are a number of others, such as the semantic non-null directive, the app matches directive, and a number of others. And to enable people to iterate on these together as a community and to get all the protections that we get by effectively, being under the GraphQL Foundation, I propose that we accept some of these documents into a community specs repository. So we already do things like merging RFCs into the RFCs folder. This would be kind of similar, relatively low effort for maintaining like the base versions, but then some agreement once we get past I forget what our stages are. So Strawman, no props, merge loads of stuff. But as we work our way through the different stages, hopefully these can be more stable. This is not very well defined yet, and I would love to get some feedback on this as well. So things like, should we require versioning? Should we require namespacing? Things like that. But to the TSC, I propose that we create a repository to host this in, and it be basically draft status or, strawman status for a while until we figure out exactly what we're doing. But at least we can start putting some of these documents in there whilst we're still figuring out the finer bits of the process. So what do you think?
So it's basically GraphQL best practices, or how would you frame it? Like this is, if you do it like this, it will go well.
No, not at all. There's another proposal that I have that will be that. No, this is
Okay.
more things to solve specific problems. So the semantic non-null directive, for example, I wouldn't say that using it as a best practice, like long term, we don't want it to exist anymore. We want it to go away. But it's just definitions of particular patterns that are used in the ecosystem. So it's more like the Scalars project. So you may not use a JSON scalar, for example, but if you do, here's a standard way to do that. Same for like date time. It's just for shared specifications, even if it's only a few people or a few organizations that actually use them.
Yeah, and I guess I'll jump in here, and because this is something that came out of a lot of the discussions that we had, Benji, and you may remember in this meeting, I guess before the break, I was trying to push forward this app matches directive as part of the spec, but after much discussion, we kind of came to the conclusion that, well, at least for now, it probably makes more sense as a userland spec, similar to the connections spec and the global ID spec. And so whilst I could just publish that on my own random, markle.com website or whatever, like who's going to see that? And so, the idea is that if we think this is a useful enough, common enough thing, then it, has some semblance of not being official, but being in a centralized place. And there's a lot of prior art here for other open source projects that have like contrib repos or community repos, where there's kind of like the organization maintains a central visibility of all of these useful community contributed plugins and whatever. So I see very much in the vein of that. And then I guess I also think of it similar-ish to like PEPs, or like, pretty much every language has like a numbering and a number, contrib, like a numbered RFC model. So we talk about PEP8 style formatting. So I could definitely see if there are like competing match directives, for example, maybe we start kind of numbering them in that way. So anyway, there's like a ton of prior art here, both in just from like other languages and other models. So and then like I said, I'll sneak in. I didn't create a separate agenda item for it because I thought we could talk about it under this agenda item, but the match directive that I was talking about last time, now it's going to be one of these community specs. So I'm excited for this to be a thing. So thank you, Benji.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. My question is about the organization of this. Is this going to be do we aim for having separate repositories for these, like that we have a contrib one, or do we want to consolidate this everything together into one? And where's which one is this one? Is this the main spec repository? Do we want to collaborate everyone together in one repository?
So I think this should be a separate repository called, for example, Contrib. I think Contrib's a great name for it. Thank you for that, Mark. And then, yeah, everyone would be able to send pull requests to that. I think we'd probably put folders in it. There might be like a GraphQL folder for like the more standardized ones, like the cursor connections, for example. And then maybe just like organizational username folders for other people. Inside of there, maybe we've got like a file that dictates like the kind of people that have been given, I don't know, maintainer access of that. Like if they send a pull request, it's okay to merge. But yeah, to start with, one new repository called Contrib that we just start putting stuff in and see what happens.
Yeah, I'm just asking because generally having something like a monorepository gives you great visibility in the open source space, right? So that means that essentially the more important, I mean, it gets more and more important that people see that there's actually a lot of people involved and a lot of work done under the foundation and in GraphQL. Having less repositories is always better, and that's where this question comes from, right? So that we could even say that it's just subfolders in one repository, and then it's a very active specification bundle, right?
The idea is to do it like the specs, like the scalars, right? Because that's exactly how the scalars repository works. It's one repository where we basically have a contributor, one folder where you can contribute your scalar specs into, and they are then also on the website showed in this namespaced way.
Yeah, I'm more saying like, should we, like, if we do this namespace like in the GraphQL scalars repository, that main spec could also just be in there. So could be composite. And
So one of the reasons that I'd like to avoid this, and I hear what you're saying, and that there is definitely some value to it. But the GraphQL specification itself is a deliverable of the project, like a legal deliverable. And I think we should keep this, which is very much not that, away from it. We actually used to have the RFCs folder for the specification was under the GraphQL spec repository, but it became really hard to maintain. There was a lot of churn, and people who were trying to stay up to date with what the actual GraphQL spec was going on with that kept seeing all these other pull requests that were for really unrelated or much smaller projects. So in the end, we actually moved the RFCs folder from the GraphQL spec repo into the GraphQL working group repo, which is where it lives today. So I think trying to keep the spec itself repo clean is going to be better for people, especially people who are implementing other implementations of GraphQL in other languages, who want to just keep up to date with what is the latest going on in that's actually been merged into or being merged into the spec.
Benji, I'm curious how you're thinking about for this kind of proposal, whether to have a repo that has all of the content in it, or whether to have a repo that's just like pointers to other repos. Because I know one of the issues with the scalars one is that contributions has been kind of thin, and I imagine I'm sure there's a lot of reasons, but one it might be that if it's a repo that you don't
That
have
has
control over.
We have
that
a
has
lot of
changed. That has
contributions.
changed. Link. There's
A
a
Oh,
ton
lot.
it
of
does.
contributions.
Okay, cool. I'm out of date then. That's super cool.
But yeah, to answer the question, I think we would aim for the specs to be specifically in that repository. The aim is to put it under the stewardship of the GraphQL Foundation. So if you author the first version of it, but you disappear from the community for whatever reason, others can take over and continue to maintain it. Mark?
Yeah, I could see there being like having contributed in the WG repo myself, I don't. There's not like a ton of overhead there, especially for strawman staff. So I don't see that being a problem. And then as far as governance goes, I wonder if we could even use like the code owners feature of GitHub, so that maybe you could kind of say this person owns this subfolder, so they can make their own edits in there or something. And maybe you change that as the straw man to whatever evolution we have there changes. But anyway, yeah.
I'll be leaning on you to help set that up.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'm just as a TSC vote, I'm very strongly in favor. But this would have been very helpful with fragment arguments, as that has changed ownership a couple times, and like keeping it going when it is in somebody, like it has to be cloned and then it's in somebody else's repo, and like there's just no update on progress. And yeah, that would have been, yeah.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. Also, if we consider like community specs repository, which I am in favor of, we should maybe move that together with the scalars, because that, or at least from the website perspective, that you have one point where these, because the scalars are also community specifications, if you think about that, and that you have one point for these GraphQL community specs where you can go and find all of this thing. And this especially would also be helpful if you think about the relay specifications. Like relay, for instance, dropped I think the mutation specification at one point. You don't, even if it's outdated, you don't find it easily anymore. And if we have like a central point where all these specs live, then that would be really nice.
Yeah, I agree on the longevity point for sure.
What do you think about the idea of giving numbers to specs? So in the same way you have like PEP8, PEP, I don't know, whatever.
We've
but
got
we
quite
don't give.
Sorry to cut you off, Mark. We've got quite a lot of things to talk about today. So I think there's general excitement about this. So if you're interested, come and chat about it on do we have an issue for this, Mark?
The one that you made, I guess.
Yes, that's right. So there's an issue in the working group repository number 1879. So come chat with us in there, bring your opinions. Mark, you can bring your numbers question there, which I think would be quite a good one to explore. We do need to set up a process and stuff. So yeah, please get involved. But I'd like to suggest that we move on.
All right. Bjorn, we will put you up next to give us your way into type composition.
Yes, just a very brief introduction of myself. I'm a software developer for only about 3 years, and I work at Trifork. We are a software development company doing mostly work on a consultancy basis, so a lot of projects. I've been involved with one project where we've used GraphQL, we've used GQL Gen as a server and the Apollo client. And at this point, I might also say that I won't proclaim myself being a GraphQL expert. We've been accused of making REST with extra steps in some of our projects. But one of the things we've been running into has been that some of our data structures have been sort of mandated by external parties, and we've had to work with these data types in our GraphQL model, and some of them have had repeating patterns, yet somewhat with variation. So we've been sort of missing an option to making our spec a bit more dry. And I looked into, I'll just share my screen. I've looked into whether this has been raised before, and I ran into this issue 500, where there were a discussion about how you could maybe use an inheritance-based syntax where you could extend other interfaces and then just implicitly have those fields in your new interface or type. And there was some discussion about that several years ago. So I tried, since we do our backend in Go, I tried to propose a more Go-ish approach where maybe this could be solved in a different fashion via type composition. And what I've proposed is maybe not so connected to interfaces. At least that's sort of intentional, that this is almost exclusively based on types, and you could achieve some dry way of composing your types without interfering with the way interfaces work currently, which might be good for backwards compatibility. So this is an example of what I proposed, that you could take one type that you had defined and then just put it into another type. And the meaning of this would be that then the type human would also have the fields appearing in the type humanoid. And you could also combine types. So for example, you could have a type consisting of the fields of two other types as well, as a separate field as well. Yeah, and there has been some discussion in this issue, and I tried to answer some of it yesterday. I got back to it, but I guess this is just about what I have to say. Yeah.
Go ahead, New York.
Yeah. So this problem, there's a lot of nuance here because like different languages define type inheritance and type composition differently, such that it becomes unclear which specific resolver you're necessarily going to, like under the hood, do you need a resolver on type human for like defined for each field on the type human for each field that is in humanoid, or are you just going directly to the humanoid resolvers? Similarly, like this is one of the problems with doing like with aligning the fields on the interface. It's not, that being said, I have had this exact same pain at Meta because when you create a client defined type, for instance, that implements an interface suddenly, like, or if you create a client defined interface that some server defined type implements or whatever, like getting all those fields everywhere can be a big pain. What we do internally to work around this, and what I would encourage you to do to start, is actually going back to the community specs, having a specification for some directive or some, like, you have the humanoid there, you could have like at take fields from type that, and some tooling. You can use the Relay compiler to build these toolings. You can use GraphQL JS to build a script that does this, that basically takes your initial schema and outputs like the full GraphQL spec compliant schema, right? And for any iteration, this is a really difficult proposal to pull forward until we see like the specific use cases and the specific edge cases that, like, where do you actually run into problems, and is there a preference for one kind of solution versus another, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. It was also raised in the issue here, the proposal about having some directive to pre-process it. I guess that is, of course, a solution, being somewhat somewhat less experienced in GraphQL. In the beginning, when we did our projects, we didn't really have those thoughts that this was something we might need. So that's sort of my or our perspective, I would say, on that.
Also, just to give some historical context for why it is the way it is at the moment, just so we can think about how to move forward from here, is um, the GraphQL type system, just kind of irregardless of what form it comes in, introspection or this like SDL, um, was intentionally designed so that as a reader of the schema, you would have to do sort of minimal hopping between types in order to understand where you were. So if you were on an object type, you always had access to all of the fields. And so was a reason why we didn't have subclassing, because there was similar proposals for just, you pointed at some of them, to introduce subclassing. The reason why we did not do subclassing was because subclassing required, if you encounter some object and you want to know what fields are available, now you must go crawl the dependency tree of all the various subtypes in order to understand what fields are valid or not valid, which makes reading documentation significantly harder. Um, I think the doc tooling has evolved so much since, I don't know, we made that decision many, many years ago, that we have a little bit more flexibility. But anyhow, just to give you a little bit of context and like the philosophy behind the design system or behind the type system, design of the type system, why it is the way it is, was sort of the simplifying force was through the lens of the person who is reading the schema and trying to be able to make like products work. Is it easy to use from that point of view? And less so from the point of view of the person who is building the schema and wiring all their stuff together on the server side. Obviously, that should also be important, but we sort of intentionally made that the second priority relative to the user of GraphQL and the client, or the consumer of GraphQL, I should say.
I have a question regarding this. Is this in this form not so this is not base type, right? This is just a combination of like an embedded type. So it just essentially is a shortcut to writing these three fields in type human and in type droid, right? Is this correct? So it's not a base class. So human is not a base. The base of human is not humanoid. Is this correct?
Yeah, I'm not completely sure what you mean by base class in this context.
It's not inheritance. I think that's what you're
Yeah,
asking,
that's
Pascal.
exactly
Yeah.
that's what I was. That's exactly what I was asking. Do you see in your experience now, when you look at your use cases where this idea comes from, do you see value in the second example that you have here, or do you mainly have the first example that we have here? So the humanoid one compared to the timeline item and identifiable one.
Um, well, the second one at least is one we could have a use case for. We have had several. We're in digital health in our projects, and we've had some like a sender and a receiver, and those things have been repeating across different data structures. So it would be nice to, for example, say, okay, this is a microbiology uh, examination answer, and it would have a receiver and a sender. And the same for a biochemistry answer. We could put in those as well. That's sort of a use case for that. We
Right.
could have used, yeah.
Right, because I'm coming from the point, especially after Lee said that base typing was mainly avoided because of ease of documentation. If we are considering something like this, we probably should evaluate if simple base types are something which would solve the problem as well, because that from I mean, I'm biased because I'm coming from from C sharp, right? But a base class is something which I find a bit more natural than this, and it will also fit a bit better into the idea of fragments because it's very close to an interface. It's not an interface, but it's close to it. Martin.
I had a question about breaking changes, our favorite topic. This is something that changes the SDL syntax, meaning probably the execution is not changed at all. Queries continue executing as usual. So can we, I suppose we all agree here and we say this is the way to go. Is that something we can add, like in the next release of the spec, which is, by the way, going to happen in 3 months now that we have released train just before GraphQL Conf. But jokes aside, feels like this is something that can be added relatively easily, right? Like we have less restrictions on SDL compared to other stuff, or do we?
Yeah, this isn't going to break any existing queries, so it's fine from the point of view of adding stuff. We can always add stuff like this. It is a breaking change for tooling, but many things like that are like if you feed newer SDL into tooling that doesn't support it, that's going to be a parse error. But that's fine.
Yeah, it's like executable definition descriptions, right? It's the same kind of stuff.
The critical thing would be that the introspection representation would still need to be compatible as it was. So
Yep.
if you looked at this through introspection, you would see all of those underlying fields, even if they're not shown in SDL. And this is one of the questions that I have around this, like how do we know whether a field should be shown locally or not? Do these types have to be mutually exclusive in terms of fields? What happens if you redefine it locally when we print the SDL back out? Does that field come back out again or not? There's a lot of questions around that.
Maybe so the topic I wanted to kind of flag here is the and maybe a way to reframe this proposal to make it easier to understand and more viable is SDL gets used in two very different ways. One way is it's a representation of your entire schema. So you can take an introspection, you can transform it into an SDL. You can actually do that in a tight loop, and you'll not lose anything if you start from introspection. Um, and so it's a way to say this is what the schema is. But it's used in another way, which is an input to create a schema. And we already have a bunch of syntax in the SDL, which would never be used to represent a schema, like the extend syntax, for example. Extend syntax only matters so that you can produce a schema. It doesn't describe the end result of having produced a schema, if that makes sense. And this feels like it could be a common way to do that. So, and Benji, I saw you had some comments on the actual PR itself. You know, you could imagine using like a spread syntax. So you're like type human is dot 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 humanoid followed by some planet is the thing. And what you're saying is produce a object type called human, which starts by copying all the fields from this type and pasting them into that type. And then here's one more type or one more, I mean, fields from that type into this type. And here's one more field that I would like to add in addition to that, which means the resulting schema has no relation between, like, you can't deduce the fact that human spread all the fields of humanoid in. It's like purely a schema construction mechanism, which if you were in a code first environment, you can already do that just fine. In fact, most code first environments already have this kind of mechanism. And in which case, then zero changes to introspection. There is no inheritance. There is no, like, the type system itself doesn't change at all. If this purely becomes a syntactical sugar for describing an operation to produce a schema, which would be interesting and also A wildly underdefined element of the SDL is given an SDL, how do you actually produce a valid schema? Um, we have some of that like partially specified, but a lot of how extend should work is kind of underspecified. And it might just be really interesting to formally draw a line in the sand between here is a grammar which describes a schema, and here is a grammar which you can use to produce a schema. Anyway, I thought hopefully that would be an interesting way to kind of slice this.
So you mean one would be very schema first editing driven, right?
Yeah, like it's an editorial tool. Because like in the same way that if you wrote like an extension block in your SDL, that would have exactly zero impact on the resulting introspection. I mean, the effect of having done the extends would show up in the introspection. If you extend and added a field, you would see that new field in the introspection, but you would not know that the way in which that field was added was because someone wrote an SDL file that happened to have an extends clause in it. It's just like that just described an operation that you wanted to do to produce a schema, and then the produced schema is the thing you see in introspection. So anyway, my suggestion is that um, the scope of this RFC should be about producing a schema and not about representing a schema. Yeah, constructing a schema. Thank you, Yvonne. But Bjorn, I wanted to check to make sure that that was like a fair characterization of the problem that you were trying to solve before I steer it in that direction.
Well, see, I think so. Yes, we are schema based first. So yeah.
So I mean, this could be a chance. Like this could be a bit crazy. What comes next? But this could be also a bit of a playground for us, where we essentially would define things like this as a superset just for schema editing, schema construction, which essentially follows the rule that this can be pre-processed and then can be yields a normal schema. And it goes a bit into the direction of how, for example, TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. The cool stuff would be that we would have a playground to play around with this, and if something really is good and feels good, it might actually makes it back to the main specification. And it wouldn't be so bad if we break this because essentially there's always a way around it. You could essentially just say that, okay, I now produce, you could toggle a feature and the output would be the schema without this feature enabled. So for example, if this, let's say within this specific feature would be implemented, and then at some point, people think that, oh no, it was a bad idea, we want to deprecate it. The way for people using this feature to get away from it is to essentially just run it through the preprocessor. And what will happen is that it will insert the fields done. So that could be interesting for us as a playground for new syntax and so on.
That's an interesting idea. Anyhow, we've spent certainly more than 5 minutes, but I think this is a really interesting topic. Bjorn, did you get the info you need in order to proceed with taking this in the right shape?
Yes and no. I mean, I made this proposal, but I also want to proclaim that I'm not invested enough, I think, right now in GraphQL to take it that much further, I think. Yeah, sorry. But I mean, I would like to participate in the discussion, but I know that you have the concept of a sort of a champion that moves things forward, and I'm not sure I'm the right one for that role.
Yeah, do you want to chat? Because I feel like this has definitely excited a lot of people here with the idea of like formalizing construction versus final schemas and a lot of things we could do with that. I think I get both ends of this. So maybe like we can chat and I can help you kind of like reformat or like repropose this in that lens. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
What's the best way to do this, Mark? Are you thinking about Discord?
Yeah. I mean, we can chat in the PR and then make sure that we're in Bjorn, I don't know if you're in the Discord, but we can take it to the Discord for more sort of synchronous chats.
That's good.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I agree. I think finally kind of making a much clearer cut between how do you represent a schema with SDL, which I think was useful in its own right, especially for the AI working group crew, from the surface area of how you can construct schemas, is quite worthwhile. And I like this as like one of probably a small handful of additions that we would want to consider that would all be like really interesting construction mechanisms. But anyhow, let's continue. Jeanette, you're up next with talking about fragment reuse or non-reuse, I should say.
Yeah, I just wanted to check in on like where we are in terms of getting this merged. I think last time we were thinking it's basically there, like maybe we could play around more with the wording of like component. So just wanted to volunteer if there is any more iteration we need to do, or if we think it's basically ready to go.
I will admit that I have not done a final read, so I don't have an answer for you right off the bat, but it is a small PR and I see a very large number of check marks on it. So I'm going to go ahead and say you're probably in good shape. And we'll do editorial pass and get this done.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I am not always the best at responding on Discord, but if there is anything upon final read that you think does need changes, always feel free to like at me and I'm happy to take another pass at it.
Also at me and I will.
Oh yeah, Matt's better at
Jeanette.
Looking at the Discord. So okay.
Nice. Just to make sure we stay organized, I put a tag on the PR to mark it as accepted, which usually means the next step is final editorial review and merge. That way we don't forget, because that's often a way that we go through and make sure that we're merging the right stuff as we search by label. Thanks for bringing that up to our attention. All right, Martin, you're up next. Scalars.
Okay, scalars. We talked about this already a little bit in the contrib repository discussion. We have scalar, which is actually exactly this, but just for scalars. And I loved Michael's idea to join both efforts, but this came actually before. Actually, let me grab the link and copy paste it in chat. If you go to the
just one thing, Bjorn is still sharing his screen. Just be aware of that.
Good thing I didn't go to something strange.
Yes.
I didn't even notice. Actually, maybe I can share mine then. How do we go to the Scala website? Custom scalars. So we have lots of scalars now. We have the historical ones, which have been there for years. The ones from Andy, that time, local date. We have Apollo scalars. We have Chili Cream, and we have another one from Jacob, Long, and we have even more in the pipe. So the question I had, which was a bit related to the contrib discussion, is one, should we version this? And two, should we have a blessed GraphQL namespace for scalars that we want to promote a bit more? Because as you can see, we already have, I think, 3 different versions of date time with slightly different behaviors, mostly around precisions.
Well, this was the whole thesis of the site, right? Is like
Yes,
date time in particular so spicy and no one can agree to
yes.
let everyone choose their own and in terms of having a like a formal GraphQL namespace.
But I
If
think we
we
can. But Lee, I think we can, in discussions, get to a compromise one. At least I saw that from the discussions we had on the repository.
um I think that's probably fair. And then I guess the question is, because my like immediate thought is we already have a GraphQL namespace. It's the GraphQL spec. Like you'll just write it directly into the doc. In which case those scalars we would want to have like anything that we put into the spec, we'd want to be namespaced in a particular way, or set up in a particular way where it gives people the ability to override those easily. That was like the main concern with specking a date time in particular scalar was that no one could agree on exactly how it should work, and we decided what we actually needed was to let 1,000 flowers bloom. And so as long as we have a path to say like, hey, here's our recommended one, but if you don't want to use that, that's totally cool. Here's a whole list of other community ones. Then we're in good shape. But yeah, my recommendation would be if we think that one elevates to the GraphQL level, we should put it in the actual formal spec rather than a separate space.
Well, that's
Yeah,
for the. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, because at the moment, like I find it really good that everybody is now pushing their scalar definitions there. But we already can see there are a couple of them that overlap so much that with a bit of work, we could find common ground.
Yeah.
And I think that it would be nice to have a way to kind of upgrade them.
So
The other thing that could be
my
interesting is to organize this website by kind rather than by contributor. So that if you're like, I need a date type, you go and you realize that there's 4 different variants really quickly, rather than having to like, I wonder if Chili Cream published one, scroll down to the Chili Cream section, and find one. Um, because I know there's like long there floating at the bottom. Like there's obviously like a very small number of very common types, but with like a lot of variation in the space and how they work. And I think part of the value of this site is for people to very quickly kind of pop them all open and review, and then pick the one that aligns with their own philosophy.
One
Yeah.
suggestion that I have is that the specs themselves can, if you say, for example, that these are equivalent, they can literally link to each other and say this is equivalent to that one. And it could be that if we do that in a good enough way, the tooling itself can pick up on that. So if you happen to use, say, the Apollo date time as your specified by URL, but the client implements the Andy's one, then the tooling might be able to read that, follow the link, and say, "Oh, I already implement this other one, so it's fine." You might want to, if you want to push that further, you could do like this is a subset of this other one. So if you implement the other one, you implement this one, but not the other way around, that kind of thing. I also have a slight concern about having like a blessed GraphQL namespace, and that is essentially that once something exists in there, it's going to be very hard for anything else to compete with it because people are just going to look there. I would rather that the best specs like effectively float to the top. And if you, for example, have 2 people with a datetime scaler and one of them goes, actually, yeah, your one is better, you can say replaced by or something like that and link to the other one. So it exists forever and people can still implement the old spec, but like new people who go to this URL can be redirected to say, hey, rather than implementing this, you should probably go and implement this other one instead. Which is kind of
This
how the
leads
RFC's system works for HTTP.
this leads to another thing maybe. So for implementers like, I mean, we are pushing that now from Apollo, from Chili Cream. There are a couple of others, but to get more visibility on that, should we like have a remark in the proper spec that says there are you can find other
Let's
scalar
make
specs there?
this. We can, because we already say arbitrary URLs are fine. Feel free to publish them, but especially now that this has taken a lot of we have a lot of cool stuff going on here. Yeah, the spec should just link directly to this doc that says if you're interested in exploring other scalars, we first class host a bunch of community contributions here. I think that'd be super high value.
There's another item there which is versioning, but we don't have a lot of time and we touched on it quickly. We don't have the issue urgently, so we can see when we have it, but my guess is we're going to need versioning at some point.
I don't think you need explicit versioning. I think if you do what I was suggesting just now, you can just say replaced by and then link to a new URL, which can have an implicit version in it, which means you don't have to conform to a specific versioning structure. You don't have to do Zemver. You don't have to do all this other complexity.
Yeah.
If you
And
want
I also don't. I'm very conservative on scalars, right? If you change a scalar and you start with versioning, like people are very upset that upgrade, for instance, from Apollo Server 1 to Apollo Server 2, and you change the same scalar in behavior.
Yes, but what's the alternative? No change at all. Like you need to be right from the beginning. That's not always easy.
The URL needs to be immutable, right? Like once you publish the URL, the whole point is that URL isn't going to change again.
Yes.
But you could publish a new URL and you could say the old URL got replaced by this URL. So like not literally a redirect, but just like if you were to go to the scalar site, the scalar site says, here's where you can find this one. We could even just like hide all the replaced ones by default, like, oh, show me the old ones. And it's like, yeah, that one, we've stricken it out. You should go here instead. And we just like have kind of follow pointers. And so you just publish a new one. You could name your URL -v2 if you want to do that. And you go in and you mark your previous one as replaced.
If you have the URL machine readable somewhat, you can do some nice UIs, like you can lower the priority of older versions, for an example. So you can build an index that bubbles the newer specs, and you can decrease the priority of the older one. And it's not that expensive, it's just a pattern in the URL. It doesn't have to be full Semver and everything.
But I have a question regarding this. The name, right? So you have the contributor and you have the name of the scalar. So when I use Apollo and I use the datetime scalar, this is the unique key to this scalar. So honestly, like it's not allowed to change. Like we can do editorial changes and so on, but
yeah, if you look at the Apollo ones, it's a good example actually because they are all suffixed with a version, so the version is at the end. So the version is part of the key.
How you mean?
He made it a name, instant .v1 or something like this.
Right.
And I started at 0 because I know we made mistakes. And so
but really at this point, for us, when we looked at the scalar, we basically formalized what we anyway formalized over years in our GraphQL server. Like, do you change, like, how often do you change these things still? That's more my question.
I don't know. And the thing is, I don't want to ask myself this question. I want to be able to release something fast. And releasing something as a 0.1 is very easy. Releasing something as a 1.0 is a lot harder because you want to think it through. Like if you are like Chili Cream and you have 10 years of previous experience, it's fine. You know you can do it.
Yeah, it's the same for you guys, right?
It's the same for us. Yeah. Probably for those, it's okay. But if you want to make a new Scala, I don't know, like there's something new for AI, a token Scala, whatever. This is all new. You want to make it today, you make it a 0.1 because you're not sure something.
And maybe there should be maybe we should have something like a draft, like what we have in the proper spec, that we can say, okay, here's the scalar. This is still a draft, because like at the moment I'm looking from a standpoint. I put there the scalars we are sure about. We have for years, right?
Yeah.
Let's move this discussion back to the issue thread because we've still got quite a few topics to go. But yeah, I'm excited by this, and I also agree with the idea of like merging the specs and scalars together. That's an interesting thing that's worth exploring because they're going to have similar problems. Okay, so next up we have Benoit with directives on directive definitions.
Yes, so the idea is to be able to apply directives to directives. For instance, in our case, we would like to deprecate some directives. So this topic has been raised a bunch of times in the past, but it never landed. So I'm trying to revive this with this PR, which let me share my screen actually. Yeah. Yes. So this PR, which is based on the previous discussions. So the syntax is here. There's a new allowed location for directives, and this is how you do it. The change is fairly straightforward, I would say. Yeah, the PR is about 40 lines. This does impact introspection though, because of deprecation, but should be non-breaking. I also opened the PR in GraphQL.js, which is here. There is a disclaimer because I'm not really proficient with TypeScript. So yeah, apologies if things are wrong or missing there, but it seems to work as far as I can tell. And we did implement this on Apollo Kotlin already, and it will be available in the next release as an experimental feature. And so yeah, basically that's it. I'd love some eyes on it, and feedback is very welcome.
Benoit, does this allow cycles in the directives? So like, can you deprecate the
No.
deprecated directive?
Yeah, no, good question. No, that was a question that was raised previously actually. And I think there's already some notion of this not being allowed, either directly or indirectly. And so yeah, this is still not allowed with this PR.
Okay, I don't know that that's necessarily a problem, but it would mean exploring whether it's a problem or not, and avoiding it does make it simpler.
Yeah, exactly.
What RFC level are we on this one? Do we have RFC label actually?
There's no label on the PR, I think. No, yeah, I can't see any, so.
What stage should it be? Should be one,
I'm going to
right?
jump it straight to RFC 1. But once people have reviewed the implementation, and if there's general consensus that this is A, something that we want to solve, and B, that this is the right way to solve it, then I think we can move to RFC 2. Technically, we should have done RFC 0, but I think this has already been proposed before. It was already
Yeah.
effectively RFC 0, so RFC 1, I think, is right.
We're talking about this for years, directives and directives.
Yes. I think the first issue was in 2021, I think. Or 2022 maybe. But yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's the main concern is syntax, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see the position that you've put the directives here in this, because it must be before the on keyword means that there's no ambiguity. It's quite clever. Seems to work fine with parenthesis on either, neither, or both of the directives. Should be no issue with stringing more and more directives. There is arguably some legibility concerns if you add enough of them. But I mean, why would you do that? So yeah, in general, I think that this is okay. New York.
Yeah, just the one thing that we have to be aware of with the syntax specific changes is there's a lot of related tooling to at least have a PR. So it's not just GraphQL JS. There's Graphical has like the VS Code syntax highlighter. It would probably be good. Like I can probably put up a PR to add this to the Relay compiler. I'm pretty convicted that this is something we want. So I can do some of the tooling stuff, but just it's like just the SDL. There's lots of like things that have weird SDL syntax dependencies in the GraphQL main repo. I'm not even talking about like the broader users.
Okay, cool. Do you have what you need, Benoit?
Yeah. I guess
Fantastic.
we'll follow up in the next time.
Right, Rob, do you want to see if you can cover your deference stream quite quickly?
Yeah. Yeah, all I have is I just want to reminder to take a look at this PR that I have linked. Also want to ask if you think it would be helpful to start the separate working groups again, maybe as a dedicated time to review these PRs, maybe would be helpful in moving faster.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that. The main reason we stopped doing them was just because no one was adding anything to the agendas. So we can set it up to run a secondary again. We were previously running 2 different times for that. Is just one additional meeting going to be enough, do you think, per month?
Uh, yeah, maybe every other week.
Okay.
But at the same time, should we do it every second week at the same time? Because the other approach, the other attempts with the second meeting was to get more time zones in. But this sounds like we just want to get more work done.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. Okay, I'll set up a schedule to mirror this one, assuming it doesn't conflict. I'll look into the calendar, I'll figure all that out, see if I can get it to be the same time, either 2 or 3 weeks later. Set that up, and then if you start adding agenda items to it, hopefully other people will turn up.
Yeah, I do like the idea of two times. Might be helpful to get because there isn't really a lot to discuss. It's really just getting eyes on the PR, and I just kind of want to have a dedicated time for us to do that. So different times for better time zone coverage would, I think, be good.
Yeah, and deference stream is something we've wanted for quite a long time, so we do need to put in the time to get it in. So yeah, I think that's very reasonable. Okay, leave that with me. I will set up the scheduling for that, and then hopefully the first one of those will be, I guess, mid-February at this point.
Sounds good.
On the topic on defer stream, sorry, just catching up. Is that in GraphQL JS v16 or 17? I think it's in 16, right? But just trying to like if you can. I suppose I know nothing about different stream. I want to test the latest changes. What version of GraphQL JS do I use?
You need the pre-release version of 17.
Release of 17. Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right. Now it's my topic. Okay, I have 2 topics. I'm going to do service capabilities first, because I'm just going to scan over it really quickly. So you may remember that I've brought before the service capabilities and error behaviors pull request. This is just service capabilities. So the idea is to give the service, the GraphQL service, the way of indicating to the client, to the tooling, what features it supports. This is for things that live outside of your type system. So for example, does the server support fragment arguments? If it doesn't, then you're going to need to transpile them before you send the request. Otherwise, you'll get parse errors on the server. These are things that you can't determine just from the introspection results currently. But also, this can be useful for auto configuration of clients. So for example, if you support subscriptions, how do you support them? Is it WebSockets? Is it server sent events? At what URL do you use this? Do you use trusted documents or persisted queries or anything like that? And if so, what protocol do you use? What naming do you use? Where do you send those? Things like this. So basically, this is an ability to describe the functionality of your service, that is to say, your server effectively, separate from your type system. I have proposed a slightly different syntax to this than what was previously suggested. So previously I was doing service and then inside of that a capabilities block which had key values inside of that. Now I'm instead recommending the capability keyword. This seems to work a lot nicer. It's not as nested. It's neater. You'll notice that parentheses are used if we're passing URLs. So let me just drop the link into the chat. So if you have a capability that needs a value, so in the case of like a WebSocket, it might be, for example, where is that WebSocket endpoint? We use parenthesis to pass the string. So it looks a little bit like a function call. The main reason for this is because the capabilities themselves allow descriptions. And if we just had a string value afterwards, it might be confused for the description of the capability that comes after. So there'd be like a passing ambiguity. There wouldn't, because you could use a colon or an equals, but it would be very easy to miss out that single character and then get unexpected results. Whereas the parentheses, I think, are much more explicit and visually distinct. So yeah, generally, this is effectively RFC1, I would say, from the fact that it inherited from the previous pull request. I've just broken it out, is all. Previous pull request is RFC1. So mainly I want to know, what do you think of this syntax? Is there still support for this? And I have also prepared a GraphQL JS implementation of this, but I haven't like properly finished it. I've mostly wrote it with the help of AI, so still need to go through and fully review it. But it does at least exist. So yeah, have a look at the syntax of that in your own time and let me know soon, ideally before next working group, what you think of it, so that I have time to address that feedback. Go on, Michael.
Yeah, we are in strong support, especially the composite schema group is in strong support of this. Not only for the error stuff, but for our stuff. So I think the syntax is good. The problem with the syntax is really you forget the colon and it doesn't even not compile. It just becomes the description of the next item. And that is why I also would support the syntax.
The change to parenthesis, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I'm going to move us on, but I would love feedback on that pull request, which is linked in the agenda. So let's talk about the GraphQL Golden Path Initiative. So if you were at GraphQL Conf in Amsterdam, I may have spoken with you, or you may have heard me speaking to people about what I was calling at that time a client specification. It was not a very good description of what it was that I was actually going for. What I effectively think that we need as an ecosystem is to take a lot of the things that we know people need and really integrate these deeply into the tooling that we have. Many people who start using GraphQL start by using, for example, GraphiQL. They type a query into GraphiQL, they run the query, they get a result, and they go, I get this, I understand this, this is obvious, this is easy. And then they'll write an application that uses it, and they'll end up having all sorts of problems. Maybe 6 months down the line, they've got performance issues. They've got massive overfetching in their clients because they've just like maybe built fragments that everyone just keeps adding another field to whenever they need anything. Now they've got all these things that GraphQL promised you wouldn't have, like overfetching, underfetching, all sorts of complexities there. And then, of course, there's the server-side concerns. There's the N+1 problem. There's security issues, performance issues. There's all these sort of complexities, and we know that a lot of people like get to this point and then they just go like, no, GraphQL isn't for us. GraphQL is not very good. It's too complex. They don't fully understand the problems that it's trying to solve. And partly that's because they thought they knew it from the start, didn't maybe implement many of the best practices, didn't read about the best practices, and then got themselves into a pit of failure. And I argue that that's our fault. That's our problem. We should be making a lot of these practices much, much easier. And in fact, we should be making them the default experience for people. So you'll all know that I've been banging the drum of trusted documents for a long time. I'm not saying that any of these things you must do to do GraphQL well. I'm saying they should be part of the default experience, the golden path, as it were. And if you know better, if you feel that you understand why you shouldn't do this thing, for example, I need to build a public API, so of course I can't use trusted documents, then that's fine. That's your choice. But people who come to GraphQL having not really used it before, they should fall into all of these best practices out of the box and should only stray from them when they learn better and when they find that their products or applications take them on different paths. Or if they have like a team of developers that can help guide them down whatever your organization's golden path is. So my aim
Like I
here,
agree.
go on.
Yeah, go ahead.
My aim here, I was going to say, is first of all, do we agree that this is a problem? And from the thumbs up on the issue, it does seem to be that we agree that this is a problem. And secondly, I want to get together a group of people, as many people as possible, to basically say what these things should be. What should be the default experience in tooling? What should be the default experience in the client, in the server? What we've already got like standardizing of the telemetry, but like let's build this into everything so that people can get started with GraphQL with everything in place. And it might be just a smidge more effort for them to get started than it was before, where they just do, for example, window.fetch, but hopefully means that they still get a reasonably fast startup, but they get all the best practices and they don't have that 6-month rug pull. So let me know your thoughts.
Yeah, so just from our perspective, we switched, like with the last version, we changed our approach towards our library, and it's like much more restrictive, and we force people to opt out of things. So we have a very opinionated startup set now, and you have to opt out of certain security stuff. But our thinking was like, while this gives a bit more pushback in the beginning from people, they have to think about these things if they want to opt out, and then it's okay. They should do whatever they want to do, but it's about a pit of success. You want to pit your consumers to be successful rather than everything is easy at the beginning and then they fail. However, like we as a group, we can do guidance, but then we need to push that also to the library implementers. That's the crucial thing. It cannot just be documentation. It's my
Yeah,
thought.
100%. So this is exactly what I'm trying to convey. And well put yourself there, Michael. So the aim here is to basically come together and agree what these things should be. And this should be done with all of the client libraries, all of the frameworks, all of the tooling, all of the servers and services. Let's get them all together to agree what this sort of baseline golden path is. And then let's have some form of, I'm hesitant to use the word specification, but let's have some form of guidance that says, here's what, if you are implementing a GraphQL library, here's the things that it should do out of the box. And yeah, as Michael says, you can opt out of them, but they should be on by default. So yeah, let's get people involved in this.
Yeah, so this guidance would be for library authors, right?
It would
Because
be, let's say it would be for open source, or not necessarily open source, but yeah, maintainers, software developers, not the end application developers. It's not for the end users of GraphQL. It's for the people that write the software that they use. So libraries, tooling, clients, servers, frameworks, any of these. And it obviously, in many cases, you won't need to implement all of these. Like if you're just building a code generator, you're not going to need to necessarily worry about telemetry. You're maybe only worrying about types, but maybe you do need to know about trusted documents, for example. So there is definitely overlap between these things. You need to figure out which ones are applicable to the project you're building.
yeah, I mean the tricky thing here is that the attention span of people is getting less and less, and the only thing I'm using thing here consciously. The only thing reading documentations at the moment are LLMs, or are more and more LLMs and no longer people. So if we want to get a bit of success into all of the best practices that you have to do with GraphQL, there is, yes, what the libraries can do, but then we also have to be very open about what we can do as the driving with the specific in terms of specification, so that it's by default it just works, right? Because there's only so much that you can do with as a library offer, right? So we need to see what's the problems people run into, and trusted documents, security, performance, all of these things. That's one thing, right? But let's see what other issues people run into. Like what I usually see is when people have their application running for past the 6 month, past the initial everything is slow phase, to actually everything runs fine and nice. And then they start having problems with schema, breaking changes in the schema, and all of the other pain points that you have when you actually care about software, and not just break all your consumers. So.
Yeah, so I think one of the things here that is a best practice is to have schema linting, right? To have schema guidance and say like, hey, you're using like an array here, but maybe you should be using a connection or something like that, or various other things. There are there are tools already like ESLint GraphQL that can detect certain patterns. There are naming conventions that we can encourage people to conform to. There's all these different things that exist out there. And if we basically, many people don't get a lot of value from these choices. They're kind of pointless choices in a lot of cases, especially like naming. Like just apply the default naming conventions, and that's fine. Uppercase for upper camel case for types, uh, lower camel case for field names, that kind of thing, and just stick with the defaults unless you have a good reason not to. And I think we can come up with what those guidelines are by just looking at what the most common practices are in successful projects.
Yeah, and we could
We have
even
a TSC meeting, just reminding you now.
yeah, just quickly on this. I think long term the goal should be to basically have tooling for a lot of these that sets it up by default for, if you're using Kotlin, then you will get these, like, the expectation is that your Kotlin code generation ends up looking kind of like this for fragments or whatever it is. But yeah, like, this is default. You should be plugging in with this schema evolution thing, which might be built with the Relay compiler that we just like, here's a tool that we can plug into basically any build process.
Okay.
I've
Thanks.
actually to
Sorry, Ari.
sorry, just one last comment. I've mentioned it to Benji already, but I think a lot of these concepts, like there's a lot of text talking about them already. And I feel like if we'll have like an example app, I know there's like, you can build an app in many languages, many frameworks, many things like that. But if we'll have like an actual concrete example where you can demonstrate like each one of those things as a user to the user, I feel like it might help.
Yeah, but just on this point, I thought also we should have something like how to GraphQL on GraphQL.org. Like the idea on how to GraphQL, but like how to do it in C#, here's the flow to build a web shop, whatever. And then this applies the best practices, and we have that for all languages. But anyway, let's switch over.
All right, thanks everyone, and we'll catch you at the next meeting.